you are all doing well. First of all, I'm really happy to participate in this event organized by Innovo. So thank you for the invitation, Alistair and Michelle. I think it's in a rather gloomy context. It's very exciting to see how entrepreneurs can change the world in a sustainable way. So my name is Marie de Lauzon. I'm the COO of 2CRSI. I know the name is quite difficult to remember and to pronounce. But to give you a trick, usually English speakers pronounce our name too crazy. So maybe with too crazy will be easier. And why too crazy? I think because we are proud to say that we are able to design and manufacture IT servers that others have never dreamt to make before, or maybe even never dared to think about before. And I'd like to talk to you today about the way we can combine IT and sustainability in each city on the planet. So first, last weekend, I read that before a hurricane, Walmart would fill their stores with strawberry Pop-Tarts. This is the result of their data mining and finding that stores sold 7 times more strawberry Pop-Tarts before a storm than usually. So this big data is very useful data for Walmart indeed. And incidentally, it also whets my curiosity as I never tasted Pop-Tarts. But beyond that point, talking about big data, we see it's quite useful in a commercial way, but it's also quite useful for good. Of course, no need to say that these weather data can also be very useful to anticipate hurricanes from a practical point of view in order to protect the local population. I know I heard Olivier before me mention that before. I think there is no need to emphasize how the IT capacity to compute and store all that data requires a lot of servers and power, which means a heavy carbon footprint. And I won't elaborate either on how pressing this environmental issue is. Fortunately, I'm an optimist and I have faith in mankind. And I fully agree with British historian Toynbee, that you probably all know, in the sense that new civilizations are born in environments that are unusually difficult. He wrote that the greater the challenge, the greater the stimulus. And I think that given the climate challenge that we're facing today, this must really be a new dawn. In this environment, 2 crazy teams promote a new approach to IT. First, with a lower power consumption. This is something we'll go back on. As you understood, we are talking about sustainability. Then with a tailor-made approach to customer-specific needs, as opposed to the general trend promoted by many manufacturers that say that who can do more can also do less. We want to make sure that you're not using a Formula One to drive to the bakery. So this may sound trivial, but it's not the usual approach to IT today. And we think it's really part of a sensible, cost-effective, and environment-friendly approach. Then third, also with outside-the-box solutions. I wrote here mutualizations of components, because these are outside-the-box solutions are literally outside the box, because we mutualize some components, such as power supply or fans, outside the servers. And by putting them outside the servers, it allows us to have more space inside in order to increase computing density, which is what many customers are still looking after. And it's also a way to make those elements more efficient outside the box. For instance, if you take fans, we remove fans from inside the servers, and we use much more efficient fans at the rear of the racks, and those fans at the back are much more efficient than the smaller ones that you could have inside the servers. And also, last, we also promote local production. Today, with 6 production sites, 4 in Europe, one in the US, one in India. And this local production means, of course, means less transport, but also more local skilled jobs. And this is something we think important to develop, to really grow a local ecosystem. So the first point was to lower power consumption. And the first way to lower power consumption is to find more efficient cooling systems to dissipate the heat produced by the electronic components. So here we're talking about, for instance, the processors and graphic cards mainly, which are the ones that produce the most heat. And two CRSI teams have started quite a few years ago to make major progress in air cooling, thanks to the mutualization of fans that I was referring to at the rear of the rack. And since then, they also have developed two other technologies. One is immersion, where you have servers that are fully immersed in a tank filled with a dielectric fluid. So you have servers that are set vertically in a very large tank. And the second one is what we call direct liquid cooling, which means that a fluid in a pipe goes through the servers in order to cool them. And so here on this slide, you can see a rack equipped for DLC. So you can see some pipes in blue on the left-hand side, bringing in cold water, and also pipes in red evacuating warm water. And you would have noticed that there are also some big fans that are here to dissipate the remaining heat that was not dissipated by the fluid. And so the double benefit of those technologies with direct liquid cooling and immersion cooling is that first, by cooling down components directly, they improve their performance level, and also they reduce the probability of an issue on the component, so it also reduces maintenance. And then the second benefit is that cooling technologies allow huge savings in power, as we don't need much or any at all air conditioning anymore in the data center. So because these type of cooling are just self-sufficient, and you don't need to add extra air conditioning. So this is good for the planet, but it's also good to make savings when you think that electricity is the first cost item in a data center. So I think usually, I think it's good when you think about sustainability. Sustainable means good for the planet, but it also means that it's a good solution going forward in the long term. And also, I would say that the beauty of immersion and even more direct liquid cooling is that they allow an efficient reuse of waste heat. We've been talking, Olivier has been talking about waste heat mainly from industrial production. Obviously, data centers produce a lot of heat themselves. And so this heat can be used for instance, for domestic hot water, can be used in swimming pools. For instance, one of our clients has today won the contract to bring servers to heat the swimming pool for the Olympic Games 2024, for greenhouses, or even for district heating that also we were talking in Angie's presentation, if you further increase the temperature a little bit. So practically speaking, you can see here just a few examples of projects that were carried out by some of our partners. And these projects demonstrate that we have existing solutions today. This is not looking at the future. This is looking at infrastructure that is already working now. So these projects are, for instance, for schools and universities, which could then benefit from additional computing at scale for their students and scientists, as well as obviously hot water and seasonal heat. Projects in hospitals and social centers. So beside heat and an increased computing capacity, it was also interesting for hospitals to be able to have their data stored on premise. So this is one additional element to take into account. And last, another example for use for urban farming, which is so it was a project using IoT in order to optimize the crops. And this IoT used computing capacity that was on premise also, and generating the heat necessary to grow the plants. So these were projects where the beneficiaries of heat and compute were the same. But these systems mean that we also have the ability to grow these edge data centers, use for external customers. So if you link them all together, it can make a huge network of data center. Today we're talking also for energy. People look at solar, for instance, solar systems. We know we have large solar plants, but also more capacity that is remote and located locally on the roofs, for instance. So this is more or less the same approach. So today, what we know are the large data centers. And we are used to, when you mention the name data center, usually you would think about a large operation, so in a very big building and very modernly equipped, and also quite big in order to benefit from economies of scale. Economies of scale in terms of air conditioning, in terms of cybersecurity. So it can be on the equipment side, but as well on the software side. But beside those large data centers, we see a new trend emerging, and that trend is the trend of edge data centers, which are smaller, which are closer to users and data sources, therefore providing lower latency. And they are also quite flexible, as you can add, if you need extra capacity, you just add one more location, one more edge data center. So scalability is much bigger when you look at these data centers compared to the large ones, where basically once you're full, and you have to think about a new investment in a new infrastructure. And then last, the edge data centers also allow to make a very efficient local reuse of waste heat. So this is something quite interesting. Obviously, large data centers can also provide some heat, but then it's not the same thing. You would have to build a very specific infrastructure to be able to use that heat in a district heating system, for instance. So this picture looks very much like the one that was presented by Olivier before. I think this is more or less what sustainable digital cities would look like tomorrow. And I hope that if we still have some friends from Boston, I hope this is something we can talk together about, because it would be great to see Boston looking like this. So obviously, this new sustainable city would use renewable energy, would also have a combination of large data centers providing heat, and also small edge data centers that can provide computing power, decentralized computing power, as well as a local heat source. So I think I managed to keep the time. Just as a summary, I think it's really, we all know that it's really critical for human growth and development, that it's really important to be able to still continue developing capacity in IT to allow human growth and development. But I think that with technologies allowing lower energy consumption and the reuse of waste heat produced by servers, we could avoid millions of tons of carbon emissions each year. And as you could see with the projects I mentioned before, this is not a dream. This is not a vision of the future. These projects already exist. So technology that can be used to implement similar projects are already existing today. And so I count on you. I know we have many people connected online, so I count on you to promote this idea as much as you can, because I think it's good for us. It's good for both human beings and for the planet. So I hope that people can promote this, and so that it becomes as obvious as recycling paper, for instance.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Marie. Thank you very much for this great presentation. A couple of questions. So, I'm digesting all the information we got from this morning. It's amazing. So it seems like quite a huge undertaking, a major transformation, a revolution. What are some of the companies maybe you see that are very promising, game-changing, disrupting, that you think the audience should be knowing about? Maybe getting close to, that you think, besides, your company, Too Crazy. I love the name. I finally can pronounce it very well. And I love the name. So what are the companies, you think we should know about that are driving that transition? Who are going to be the leading companies tomorrow?
I think the leading companies driving this trend tomorrow might not exist today. And actually, running the risk of upsetting also my predecessor, I think even in energy, the leading company in tomorrow's, for instance, for renewable energy, might not even exist today. So it's a difficult question. Of course, we're working with many partners, but today I have to say they are rather small. So it's on the French side, people like Tresorio, for instance, who have developed really a great technology. But not only, we mentioned before that, so basically the project people that were involved in the various projects I mentioned were so Tresorio, Steam Energy, sorry, and then WindCloud was the promoter of one of those projects. So, but actually there are many companies today who are involved in this. I think none of it has a critical size today, because as I said, also it's an emerging trend. People are still used to think about data centers as large operations, but it's not. So I think it's really time that we get started on this type of projects.
Excellent. And what are you missing? What is, we heard this morning, radical, acceleration is needed. So, what are you missing to really push this forward and make your projects go faster? And then just in general, voice for also, we had Olivier Rack from NG, we'll have, Schneider Electric later on. How do we push this forward more faster, given, what everyone's been saying, that it's so critical to us all humans? That, so what can we do? I feel it's too slow.
I agree. And I think what we are fighting for today is really to get more recognition. And when I said I count on people to spread the word, it's really that. Talking about Too Crazy, because this is what I know best. When I meet some people, investors, or because we are a listed company, when I meet some potential partners, and we meet for the first time, then so first we get introduced. They come to us, they come to visit us to understand what kind of technology we are able to offer. And then sometimes they tell me, look, but I don't understand. This is great. This is really how IT should be. So why don't newspapers talk to you talk about you all the time? And so I think Too Crazy is also a young company. We are today 350 something. We have on the manufacturer side, we are roughly 150, and also we have some distribution. So you see, if you look at the manufacturer side, 150 to compete with the giants in our industry, it's not much. So I think what we need is also to have decision makers who dare inviting new companies such as Too Crazy at the table to at least present the solutions, and then they can decide. But if they stick to the usual ones, the usual suspects, nothing will change. So it's really at least have the awareness, and then not be afraid of inviting smaller company to talk to.
Excellent, excellent. So I do think, for me, this is all exciting. We should have a celebration. I think, a bit like South by Southwest, having sort of a conference. I think Boston is the right place for that, because we have every city is connected to Boston in some way, shape or form, other countries. And, maybe that's what we need to do. It's sort of an event like today, but, bigger, physical. I can see mixing maybe, all of you, but also things that are more popular for
yes.
More people like artists and so on. We have Mickey from Atlanta. There's a lot of artists over there and DJs who are also promoting this type of energy. So, I do think, there's a need of really bringing people together around a new opportunity that creates jobs. There's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs, for startups, for venture capitalists, because if the transition is going to happen, you're right, some companies are going to lead tomorrow and not known today, right? Which means there's exponential value to be created and to be made. And so also, the golden, exciting, yeah.
And sorry, if I may add, we have always tried to, we have this strategy to source our components locally as much as we can. Obviously, there are some components we cannot source locally. But I think it's also, from a strategic point of view, it's important that we try supporting local solutions, because at times of crisis, such as the one we had with COVID, I think we would be more independent. And I think it's important that we have, when I said the skilled jobs, we need to have control over that technology locally. So that's also why we think we have this mission to show what we French Too Crazy people and we Europeans and we also Americans are able to do.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you. Any questions from the audience? Any questions? I have a question if no one has a question. So for me, one question, maybe, the smart grid is great. If I'm not mistaken, one of the vision or, what people are imagining is basically solar panel on houses, battery chargers, on the houses to store basically the energy, some sort of blockchain system to exchange energy between the community, and basically shifting from what we know today, electric mobility. But then how do we do when there's a cyber attack? Is that also a concern, and maybe technology that needs to be sourced, or is it an opportunity for entrepreneurs to think about maybe building some sort of solution for that arena?
Yes, of course, we need to think about the threat, but I was talking before about having a mix with large data centers where in which you can really benefit from economies of scale, and also edge data centers. So when you look at large data centers, they are able to really build a strong shield around them and to be able to face cyber attacks. Of course, probably more than the smaller ones, but they're also more exposed. So I think overall, having this kind of a grid with edge computing does not represent an additional risk, I think, because when you have, of course, you would also have a redundancy. So basically, you have your data somewhere, but there is a copy somewhere else. So there is not a huge threat on that side. But to come back on the other element you mentioned, I'm not so sure. I agree with when you say also having storage and basically with this view to be self-sufficient. I think we are not there yet, because storing electricity is still quite expensive. So I believe more in changing the way, for instance, changing buildings, and maybe that's a good introduction for the next speaker. But if you have buildings that are better isolated, you can then use renewable energy, which I think is really this energy is really the future. Actually, it's today's energy already. But if you use renewable energy, which is the cheapest energy on the planet today, you use it when it's, of course, there is intermittency, but if you use this renewable energy when it's available, and then you, obviously, since your building is isolated, then you can increase the temperature a little bit more when energy is quite cheap, and then you can let it go down progressively. So I think there is a more sustainable way even to manage energy than using storage. But that's another topic. But I'm very interested in renewable energies as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Marie, for this speech. We don't have any more questions, so I think we can resume the call. Thank you.
Thank you for invitation.
Thank you. Speak soon.
Bye, Alistair.
Bye-bye.